I was asking him how he was doing,
We're sitting there just having a conversation like this.
and I said, like your spark is gone. And I said, and I miss you.
I look over and just tears.
At that point, I asked him if he was in danger of hurting himself. And what he said was, I don't actively choose that, but I guess I wouldn't care if I did.
Going through high school, just started, playing games more because it's obviously, wow, I feel really, really crappy, I don't want to feel that. I'm going to go do something that makes me feel, happy instead.
By the time I was in high school, I was starting to post memes on social media, and it completely destroyed my life.
That, of course, then led to me not doing very well in the real estate firm, and eventually I was kicked off my team for not producing enough results. So I decided to give up gaming for the first time.
And, I'm telling both her, my therapist, and my parents that, everything in school is going just fine. I'm getting all my work done. I'm participating in class. So she was very, very hurt when she found out that, I had been lying about all of that.
I decided at that point that I could game again, and I knew that would make me stop thinking about it. But that was also kind of the line in the sand that I had drawn for myself of, if I'm intentionally gaming to change how I feel, I'm an addict, and I can't deny it anymore after that. And then I said, screw it, did it anyway.
This reporter had been approached by an anonymous source, and he told her that I had been posting some of these offensive things back in 3-4 years ago, and the reporter took it and ran with it. An article was written about me in the school paper, and it made the local news for 3 nights. So
I pretty well gave up after that. I felt like I couldn't live without gaming, and I also at that point felt like I couldn't live with gaming at all. So I figured if I can't do either route, then I guess I'll just kill myself. And so I started planning suicide. That would have been August of 2015. And I knew I had enough money to get me by until November. That was when I had picked that I was going to put my plan in motion. I picked that specifically because that was when my grandmother died, and I knew my mom got upset that time of the year anyway. I figured the same thing would happen with whatever time of year I died, so I wanted to line those two up so that there was only one time a year my mom would get upset. I did a lot of research onto, how can I die painlessly. I bought everything I needed. I wrote out my notes. I was truthfully just wasting time waiting until November rolled around.
This person that I was becoming online, it was 2 separate lives, and so kind of living that double life was really weird, because looking back on it, everything I posted was questionable at best and just downright racist and sexist at worst. And then I look back at what I was doing in the real world, and it doesn't reflect me at all, and it really pains me, because all the people that I heard, that's all they know of me now is who I was online.
In September, my parents came out to celebrate both my birthday and my nephew's birthday with us. And when they did that, we would just meet at my brother's house. It was quite a bit bigger, it was nicer, it was just a better environment for everyone to get together and hang out in. And when they did it this time, they surprised me and just showed up at my house. And they did it about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, roughly. I still hadn't showered or gotten dressed for the day. There were soda cans, pizza boxes, just scattered around my computer area. My dog's food and water bowls were both empty, and my parents knew that I had tried quitting gaming before. And so when they came in, they didn't ask, they just stated, "You're gaming again." And so it was almost exactly 1 month before I had planned to kill myself that I walked into Restart. It's my last ditch attempt. Either it works or I can come back and just follow through with my plans anyway.
They brought this up, and it sounded like an incredible option. It's really aggressive, I think. It's very on the nose, and I think that's kind of where I'm at, is I really want to restart, really, it would be wonderful to be able to just chop it off, go cold turkey, and find a way to build up those supports and those practices to get myself back into the groove the way I want to be.
And I ended up here. And for a while, let's be honest, for a while I hated it here. There was nothing that I wanted to do more than just, leave and just go back home. But, after a while, regular therapy sessions, talking to the therapists here, the other people here, and caretakers here, I start to realize, this is actually really good to, just get away from all of it for, a while. Step back. You can see the bigger picture of just, like what your life is going to be like if you just keep refusing to admit that you have a problem.
Everything was just regimented in a way that I could easily stay on top of it, but I never would have had that kind of willpower to do for myself on my own.
In Matt's case, there was a lot of secret keeping. It just didn't feel safe for him to be honest. And, right, that's nothing against him as a person. It's just who he is at this stage in life. And so what we worked on was being honest.
In session, he was telling me, you look like crap right now. You're clearly extremely nervous. What's going on? And I said, I was really trying to, hold this in. I was trying to, get him to, show that there was some, sign of safety. Okay, I'm not going to, go back to intensive over this.
Matt was kind of going through some of the lies, and I'm trying to keep a straight face. But at a certain point, I just go, Matt, you got to cut the bullshit, man. I've played this game. I have been the guy in active addiction. I know what you're trying to do, and I see you, but you gotta stop the bullshit, man. And that kind of just froze us in that moment of time, and it allowed him to take a step back and be like, whoa, not that I've been caught, but I've been seen fully and accepted fully. And I think for us, that was a shifting point in our therapy where going forward, it allowed him to start feeling safe, that, hey, it doesn't really matter what I say, we're gonna work with it. There's no shame involved. And the more honest and truthful I am, right, it feels good, right? It gets rid of that shame. It slowly starts to crumble it and erode away. And at the core, it's there's a very good person there.
That was about 8.5 years ago now. I'm very thankful that my parents showed up on that day, because I can see now that the end of that road, it wasn't where I wanted to be, but I had no vision of anything else. And truthfully, that is mostly what I have to thank Restart for, is helping me generate that picture of what does life without gaming look like, because I had no concept of it.
I regret everything I posted, but it took a while to forgive myself, because I thought, if my family is still struggling to forgive me for this, how can I forgive myself? And it's something I'm still working on today.
Don't be afraid to, admit that you you need help sometimes.
I think that there is, there's something that they say is like you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. And I think that's a really hard place for people to get to the point where they want to be helped. And that's when I just have to say I'm so grateful for the people around me.
Thank you so much for watching Starting Over. We're now going to follow the film screening with the identity when digital distraction becomes dependence. A conversation with film directors Ryan Huh and Ali Malik and Hillary Cash, co-founder of Restart Life, the nation's first mental health treatment program for internet and video game addiction. Thank you for that film. It was also something that I had never really known about before. I feel like we hear things about rehab. We hear, when it comes to traditional addiction conversations, we hear a lot about these different types of rehab programs, but we don't really hear about the ones around, social media, internet, video game addiction. So I want to first start with Hillary. Thank you for the work that you do. It's very cool to learn about just briefly in this film and hopefully more in this conversation. I'm curious if you could, I guess, start off by just explaining some of the programming that happens at Restart a little bit more in depth. And I saw that some of the people featured here are in different programs, it looks like, all kind of tailored to their needs. So yeah, if you could just kind of elaborate on the different offerings that Restart has to offer.
Sure. The basic residential program is a 3-month program where they are without any access to the internet and to screens for that time period. Excuse me, for that time period. And during that, they are working on all the things they need to work on. That is followed by an invitation if they're interested in coming into a transition program. And that transition program involves getting a job, not being at Restart all the time, getting a job, living independently in an apartment, but still having very limited access to the internet in our facility. And then slowly introducing more and more tech into their lives, but with Restart as a safety net. And so that's what you were seeing are people at both stages, of the program, plus one who has been out of the program for 10 years and, is successfully living his recovery life. The idea is that when people come, there are many different things that they need to work on. So our approach is very holistic. They have mental health problems, which include the addiction, but they are also coming to us depressed, anxious, and sometimes with other mental health conditions as well. So our therapists are helping them address those mental health issues, but they're also detoxing, which is a physiological process that they're going through and which they can go through over the course of 3 or 4 weeks because they don't have any access to their drug of choice, which is the internet. But we're also working on their physical health because they often come in with poor physical health. They haven't been sleeping adequately. They haven't been eating adequately. They haven't been exercising. They haven't been often just taking care of brushing their teeth and taking showers and things like that. And so we're helping them work on their physical health as well as their mental health, and also helping them develop skills that they may be lacking. social skills, communication skills, skills to regulate their emotional states, organizational skills, that kind of thing. So, and also helping, we usually are also working with the families. So helping them get a better relationship with their parents and other members of their families. Again, it's a very holistic approach that we take.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think it's also just again kind of unheard of in this world. So thank you for the work that you do. I'm curious, Ryan and Ali, obviously this process, especially Ali, this is like your first foray into this world, right? But Ryan, I assume it's also maybe the first time you've kind of experienced this part of digital well-being, this concept of a restart. What was it like meeting, your interviewees for the first time, hearing their stories? I guess, what was that experience encountering this kind of world that you've never really been into?
Yeah, I can start with that. So when Ali and I we went to Restart really to explore this story and explore this topic. It was really interesting, and we were really excited about the journey about starting to work on a project together and make a film. But I think what was really great about it is we were coming there as like we're around like the same age as these young men who are like in the program as well. So it was really great to just go there and just like sit down with them and just have lunch with them first, right? And just like meet them. And then there we like really just like talked with them. We just bonded with them. And when we started just learning about it like that, right? It's like you might like look at you might learn about this like term, right? Digital addiction, things like that. So you just look at these people as, oh, he is a addict to technology and all these things, and just try to put them in that box. But it was just as simple as like we just started to relate with them and just started to talk with them. And then from there, it's like we felt like so similar. And then it's like, as we learned their life stories and what led them to, start to enroll and restart, it really felt like, because they're like, there's nothing crazy about them, right? And it kind of just made it feel like anyone could kind of fall down this path if, you just sort of start to have like some different unfortunate life events that kind of lead you to, feeling bad and, starting to just use video games and just use technology way too much in your life. Just like you would use any other vice to kind of cope with, bad things that are just happening in your life. So that was really, a really interesting, thing that, part of the experience, which is like, it's like obviously, oh yeah, obviously you just want to be a nice person and just talk to people. And it's like, as cliche as it sounds, it's as real as it was.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Ryan's take on it. It was really a beautiful experience to get to go and meet new people every day. And I think going into it, what was really beautiful about it is that I had no idea what to expect. I've never been in a rehab center to begin with for any addiction, right? And I think when you talk about rehab, obviously the first thing you're thinking about is traditional drugs and alcohol. And those we have some preconceived notions as to what the typical symptoms are and what the typical candidate might look like. With a digital addiction, I did not have any like pre-existing image in my mind of what I was of the kind of person I was going to meet. And that expectation was kind of met because I felt there was so much diversity among the candidates. I mean, of course, there are trends and similarities, um, but there's definitely, I was shocked to see how much different personalities there were there. And there were some people who were genuinely in the program who were more sociable, who were less sociable, who came from this background or that background. And it was definitely, there's a lot of diversity there. And it goes to show what Ryan was saying, it can happen to anybody. It can really happen to anybody. Depression can hit anybody, rich, poor, young, old. It doesn't really matter. And that was also the beautiful thing was just getting to learn. Because on one side we're learning just from our own, firsthand experiences, just talking to the candidates. But we're also learning from Hillary. We're learning from the other social workers who are there. I mean, Jericho, who is in the film, Matt's therapist. I mean, he in a very scientific way was breaking down for us how technology affects these individuals, how gaming specifically affects individuals, and he himself is a former victim to video game addiction, so he was able to speak firsthand about how it's affected him, not just emotionally but physiologically. So yeah, overall, I mean, it was just every single day was so, from my perspective, and I think Ryan's perspective as well, so educational. I just came in the whole day not knowing what to expect, but just taking in so many new stimuli and so much new information. It was really an incredible experience.
And real quick, I also just want to highlight, one of the things Ali said, just about like how it felt like, right? It can happen to anyone. Because, just the process of, when Ali and I went there and, we were meeting these guys, Rory, Theo, Charlie, Matt for the first time, right? So it's like, we're asking them to, share their very personal stories on camera, for our project. And like that's not an easy thing to do. So kind of we realized like the thing that helped us to get them to open up to us was just talking to them and just relating to them how like these problems they have, like we related to them with like our own experiences, and that really just helped us connect just from there.
That's beautiful. It really is such a universal experience, in so many different ways, I think. Which honestly, kind of leads me into my next question for Hillary is like, I think so many of us, especially as young people, but I would argue across many different ages, experience problematic social media use, for example, or problematic internet use. This concept of just feeling like you're completely tied to your phone and you can't get away from it. But the word, especially in these communities that talk about these issues, addiction is very stigmatized. And this concept of, what really constitutes addiction. And so I'm curious, especially as many of the viewers might be experiencing their own levels of these issues in different stages, I guess, what is your take on, what different, or I don't know, how do I phrase this the right way? Really, like, at what point do you realize that you need to go to a restart? Or, are there things that you can do on your own to maybe prevent yourself from getting there? Like, I guess kind of expand a little bit more on the process and maybe the stages of this world.
Yeah, that's actually a great question because how far along you are, think of the movement from healthy internet use to hardcore addiction. That is a spectrum. People travel down that path, sometimes very quickly, but it is a path. So if you're not very far down that path, you have a much greater likelihood of being able to interrupt that trajectory on your own because you recognize it and you say, this is not what I want. I'm going to take certain steps and pull myself back from it. I know lots of people who just decide to not have social media anymore on their phones. That's it, done. Or I'm not going to play video games anymore. And so if people aren't too far down that path, they can do that, especially if they've got some people around them, helping them, maybe a therapist or their friends or family that they're talking to and are encouraging them and checking in with them and that kind of thing. So people who, so there are going to be people who can pull themselves back from the brink. But when you've fallen over, when you've gone over the brink and you're really deep into an addiction, it is very, very difficult to pull yourself back from that and have it last. People can pull themselves back for a while, just like we saw Charlie doing and telling about the time he quit video games, but then he was sucked back into it, right? And so one of the really, really important things is to not try to manage an addiction, or, a near addiction on your own. That being isolated and trying to do these things on your own is really, really tough. And it is most likely going to end in failure. It's so important to have the support of other people to help you with that. And again, a therapist, friends, family who all you want to surround yourself with people who get it and understand really what your struggle is and are willing to be there for you. And there are 12-step groups. There's Internet and Technology Addicts Anonymous, Gamers, Game-Anon, and those meetings are usually online, which, you know, for internet addicts kind of works. And so getting in touch with going to those meetings, going to Gamblers Anonymous, going to Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, because porn is so often part of the picture too. And we refer to it at Restart as having an intimacy disorder, where you really don't know how to initiate, build, and maintain healthy, intimate relationships. Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous addresses that. So going to 12-step meetings or finding some sort of recovery group really can be helpful. But when you're trying to figure out how much of a problem you have, I think it's very useful to go back to the World Health Organization's definition, their signs and symptoms for gaming disorder. And it can be applied to any internet-based addiction. And there are 3 basic things to keep in mind, 3 criteria. The first is loss of control. So let's say you're a young person who, or any age person who says, I'm not going to do whatever I do online tonight because I've got to get enough sleep so I can get up in the morning, get to my classes or get to my job or whatever. But then they don't follow that, even though they have said they should, and they know they should, but they don't. That's loss of control, right? That would be an example of loss of control. So that's criteria number 1. Criteria number 2 is that the space and energy given to whatever you're doing online grows and intensifies over time. And as it does that, it's squeezing out other things. Like you might have been devoted to a relationship, but now you're paying less and less attention to the relationship because you're devoting more and more time to your online activities. Or maybe you used to play piano or sports, but you're doing that less and less and less until you're not doing it at all because all of that time is going to that. Or you used to get adequate sleep, but you don't anymore because instead you're staying up online. So that taking up of more and more of your life is another criteria. And then the last criteria is that the result of those first 2 things is that there are serious negative consequences. So failing out of classes, failing out of college, being fired from work, your girlfriend or boyfriend dropping you because you're not there for them. You know, these are serious consequences. Fighting with your family, you know, those serious consequences, sometimes very serious mental health consequences, the depression, the anxiety, serious physical consequences, you know, so sleep deprived that you can't function and maybe you get in a car accident, you know. There's serious consequences is the point. And those 3 criteria really apply to any addiction, and they definitely apply to an internet addiction.
Thank you for that. I feel like that guidance is literally nowhere. Like, I think so many people are struggling with this issue, and I think it's such a ubiquitous issue. And I think there's zero clarity as to what is considered addiction, what isn't. And I also think because it's happening across so many different people, it's normalized. And I think having very clear guidelines as to what is and is not, and even acknowledging that it is a spectrum and we don't need to use the word addiction to recognize that maybe you have a problem we don't need to get to the point of addiction to recognize we have a problem as well.
Mhm.
So I think that's super helpful. Thank you for outlining that. I guess now pivoting back to our filmmakers over here, we've talked a lot about how you have built a relationship with these interviewees, with these people in the program. I guess what is there maybe a lesson that stood out to you or an experience that really resonated with you in the process of making the film, something that you felt like you took away from one of the members of the program that really stuck with you and maybe helped you as you're on your own journey of navigating this whole online world?
I can start. I mean, it's tough because there's so much. There's honestly so much that I took away from the project that was inspirational for me. I mean, and like Ryan said, yeah, definitely I was able to relate coming in because I had my own like slight. I don't want to put it in the same conversation as the severity as to which the clients at Restart were going through, but I had my own issues with gaming when I was in middle school and stuff. So I came in with a bit of a ability to relate, but more so just the idea that we all have bad habits or traumatic experiences that eventually can ruin our quality of life in the sense that we stop being our own friend and we stop taking care of ourselves. And I've definitely been through that period of my life when I was younger and even at my time in college. And I think actually, funny enough, at the time that I was making the documentary and that summer period, I was learning to be my own friend again. I was learning to take care of myself again. And what I learned from being at Restart was that how much the small things actually did matter. How much the actual, just the simplicity of like sleeping well, eating well, being hygienic, exercising, working on yourself from the outside in is the starting point to getting your life back on track. And then after that, when you start to actually be able to physically clear yourself up and be well, then you have the opportunity to really dive in and go to the core of your problem because there is a core to all these issues. The tech and the internet, everything is just the behavior, but there's a spine to it. That's like, even when we write scripts, we all always think about, okay, what's the character's behavior, then what's the spine that drives their behavior. And you have to go to that spine. And if you don't go to that spine, any adjustment you make, you're still at much risk for that addiction, that behavior to come right back because you haven't addressed the actual core issue. And that comes from the ability of being able to face it. You know, so many people live in denial. And that's why we often need people in our lives and services like Restart to help us face and the core of our issues. And so I've been very lucky in my life that I have had people and close friends who have forced me to look at what I actually need to do to change my habits or whatever, and also have been there for me to be my friend when I haven't been my own friend. And that's what Restart, I think, is a lot about.
Yeah, I think, what Ali said about, you have to deal with, your core issues. It's so true. And I think about, especially with like, technology and, how this becomes an issue. I really think it's the most dangerous because it comes in where it is like that constant pacifier that you have where you can, it's like that Neil Postman idea where you can amuse yourself to death and you'll constantly hit yourself with dopamine so you feel good and you think that you're doing good but really you're just burning yourselves further in your problems and sometimes you just gotta rip the wound open and deal with the problem. So besides that, another one of the really key points that I really found fascinating from this experience working on this project was I think it's really about it's really all about like stories, right? Because stories are how we create our own identities. And we found, talking to these clients, especially some of the guys, Charlie and Matt, who are kind of more, further along in their recovery process, kind of, in a better and kind of more healthy place. I think, really for these guys, one of the keys, to really helping them get to a more healthy place was, starting to create like a more healthy, story for themselves of who they can say that they are, to themselves and creating that identity for themselves. I think, I remember like in the film, one of the things Charlie talked about, Charlie who has been out of Restart for over 10 years, he talked about, one of the greatest things Restart did for him was help him generate a picture of what his life looks like without gaming, because they all talked about, before it's just like you just game, that's all you do. Because like I mean, when you game in the moment, it feels good. And you're pleasing that one side of your brain that's just in the moment. But what about the other side of your brain that actually cares about long-term goals of like who you want to become and things like that versus just, hitting yourself with dopamine and constantly just, being amused with that, forever. So I think, just taking control of your story, it was really interesting to see how powerful that was. Like it literally felt like it had the power to change all these people's lives. So I think that was really a really fascinating part of the experience.
And just to add what Ryan said, yeah, totally. Like many of the Restart clients, I felt like had been convinced or convinced themselves of lies that were self-destructive to them. You know, they had stopped respecting themselves. They had core feelings of inferiority. And I think one of the goals of the documentary was also to not only get to understand the whole situation, the science of it, their stories, but also give them the opportunity to tell their stories. Because through telling your story, it is one of the most liberating things any person can do. I honestly believe that the vast majority of people go their entire lives without really expressing themselves. So when someone is given the opportunity, like this documentary, or in whatever way, like for example, I love the fact that the documentary ends with Matt journaling. Like that is absolutely beautiful to me because he's expressing himself. And only through your expressing yourself can you rework your own internal narrative. And it goes back to what we were saying, it's the core of everything.
Yeah, Ollie, when I look back at this project, I think what I feel like, I think what we should feel the most proud of is like, I look at these guys now, how it's like, and we experienced
we
it too
can't
when they
hear
were,
you, Ryan.
talking to us in their interviews. It's like they, they gained so much confidence over their vulnerabilities. So I think that's something that we should really be proud of, just doing that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, with that, that concludes our Q&A for the documentary. That concludes, I should say, this conversation called Identity When Digital Distraction Becomes Dependence. And thank you so much for creating the documentary, Starting Over. Thank you to Hillary for the amazing program that she's running at Restart. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Imagine talking to someone 100 years ago and describing to them a device that contains access to all of humanity's knowledge and can connect you with any person around the globe and all within moments and in a device that could fit into your pocket. And that is the power of our phones, where we have unlimited options right at our fingertips. But with that also comes being one out of unlimited options, whether it comes to dating, friendships, or employment. I've definitely felt this insecurity myself, especially as I've tried to grow and find clients as a wedding photographer, and also just in my personal life. And this was one of the interests and ideas that led me to my last project, a documentary about 4 men at 4 different stages of recovery at an internet and video game addiction rehab center. Ultimately, this story was about how these people came to realize that they are so much more than just the worst moments of their lives and starting to claim a new identity. And now I'm very excited to talk about my first project after NYU Tisch, which is Profile, a short film about the identities we consume and create, influenced by our culture and social media. The story follows Victor, a young Asian American man who makes a promise he can't fulfill to pay for his mother's hospital bills. Out of desperation, he plots to steal a beautiful and luxurious watch worth over $100,000 from the grave of a social media star who has passed away. In this story, the same facade of success that Victor burdens himself with, he must also use to fit in at the funeral to successfully steal the watch. Just like our real world where keeping up appearances is so key, I'm creating this film to serve as a dramatic reflection of how we are nudged to form our identities based on our attention economy. I want the film to feel like a parallel version of reality where slightly absurd scenarios occur, which feel just a little too likely to happen in our real world. This story is an epic about chasing an image shaped by our culture and social media. Writing this story has forced me to reflect on myself and my own experiences. And in that same way, I hope that you will see yourself in this story and think about the ramifications of a culture where our sense of self is so heavily influenced by attention.
To make this film happen, we have an extremely talented cast and crew, primarily from NYU Tisch working pro bono. We hope to provide these incredible artists with the resources required to perform a safe and professional film set. So this is where you come in. Our production budget covers the essentials such as camera, food, and location fees. We are currently opening up funding to friends and family, so if you want to take part in helping this film come from the page to the screen, contributions can be made on our Seed and Spark page. Thank you.
I cannot wait to bring this story to life. And if you want to continue to follow our journey, you can follow our Instagram where we will post updates. And besides that, until next time.